So, hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another installment of Marketing in Uncertain Times. I'm Lynn Gagno, and I'm live in a real video that doesn't look anything like my great picture, and that's because I haven't had a haircut for a while. We're going to have a great day today, I hope. And so let me tell you a little bit about how Zoom works. If you haven't had the opportunity, which I can't believe, in the last month to use Zoom, there's some features there. So if you roll your mouse over the corners of your screen, you'll find your control bar. For this event, which is a dialogue interview with me and Dan, we're going to ask you to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type your question into the chat window. And I will then see those two things that you do and either call on you to talk or read your question to Dan. Or whatever you tell us, whatever hints you're telling me, like whatever, let's not even go there. So the other thing that you can do is, because there's only two of us as speakers and we're really going to use very few slides at all, if you can rearrange the pictures on your screen. If you roll over the top right of your screen, you'll see something that says either the different kinds of views that you have. So you can swap your view of the videos with the screen, and you can change the number of pictures you have and who's talking. And so go ahead and play with that to keep yourself busy. But Dan and I thought it would just be great for the two of us to be large and on your screen today and nothing else. That was the idea, right? Okay, I think, and if you have questions about that, feel free to type in the chat window. We'll be happy to answer you. So these are our professional pictures, which nobody looks like anymore. So let's just wipe those away, Lori. And then I will tell you that after this recording will be available, and you can find us on isbm.com/library. But you can also email Dan, and we'll put those things up a little bit later, about 15 minutes left in the event, right? Okay, so we have a couple of things going on here. So one of the things that we've chosen to change in this timing is, as good marketers are, we're trying experiments and we're gathering data. So this is our fourth town hall. The first one had 3 panelists and an interviewer. And the second one had 2 panelists and a different interviewer. And it was Ralph Oliva, who had a very touchy-feely kind of personality. So we're gonna sort of go back that direction. I'm not quite Ralph, but I'm giving you all a virtual hug. I miss everybody. And so this one we're gonna do as an interview format. And Dan, I'm gonna ask him this question. He's gonna answer with this great wealth of experience. We've pretty much tried to find folks that have a lot of experience having seen everything, but never this, because none of us have ever seen this, and then trying to piece it together. So the next 3 town halls are in that same format of, we have been through this phase 0, which I think is 0 at this point. We have, we've stayed hunkered down, and some states are opening up and others are going to open up over the next month or so. And our companies may choose to do things or not. But in the end, we're going into another phase, which is entirely different and completely uncertain and unknown with no data again. So we're going to try and get ourselves prepared, right? And so this is one of 3 that are coming up to do that. And before we get started though, we're going to try running these polls every couple of weeks just to take your temperature. Now we hope none of you have a fever, but could you put the first one up? This is a poll, and what you do for a poll here is just click on the answer that you think is yours. So go right ahead and choose. How are you feeling? The top one says, it's all gloom and doom and I'm depressed and it's only going to get worse. And then that gets progressively less gloomy and doomy, where the middle one is, it's bad now, but I see some clouds lifting. And then it's stressful, but I'm handling it. And then the last one is, I've got this and I see the light at the tunnel. So if you can click on your submission and submit it. And then Lori, if you would show us when you feel like you've gotten a good 80%. All right. So we still have a few folks that are in the low end, and I'm sorry for you that we can't make it better. We have folks that are in the stressful and the I've got this. And we're going to compare this to a couple of weeks ago, because it feels like maybe there's a few more people in the third bracket than we had last time. So let's hope that we're getting through this. The next one is, does our outlook feel any different? So can you put up the next one, Lori? We'll just grab the data on this one. How is my company's revenue? So what's the impact on revenue for your firm? Feel free to click the one and submit. It's really too early to tell. We expect real and continued downward revenue impact over the long term. We think there's a downturn over the next few months, and then it's going to return to normal. We're not seeing much change right now, and we're expecting that once the smoke clears, revenue will grow. So which of these do you feel is yours? And then if you click and submit, and then Lori, once you feel like you've got that data, go ahead, pop that one up too. And we'll see how everybody's feeling around, if anything's changed over the last month. So a downturn, and then things will return normal. And you know, that feels good to me. I think that's actually more positive than what we saw about 2 weeks ago. So we'll gather those up and we'll put those with the data that we did 2 weeks ago. And we'll do this again 2 weeks from now. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for participating and letting us know how you feel. And so, so now let me introduce Dan Adams by having Dan introduce Dan Adams. But so Dan, your history is a little bit wide-reaching and interesting. So let you take a couple minutes and tell us how you got here. Right?
Okay, sure. Well, then, you know, I was born at an early age. I'll accelerate a little bit from that.
Good.
I started as a chemical engineer back in the mid-70s, and I quickly realized I was not cut out to size heat exchangers the rest of my life. So I went over to the dark side, got into marketing, and spent 29 years working for chemical companies. And, you know, I was thinking about this because you actually told me you're going to ask about this, but I think the pivotal event for me was I worked for this tough Italian guy from Brooklyn, and he used to say, Adams, you need to get over in the laboratory and do some work over there. And so I did. Every Friday afternoon, I would go over, I'd wrap my goggles, lab goggles in my lab coat. I'd go over and I would run some experiments, and we would kid around. I would schedule a technical breakthrough every Friday afternoon, you know, and we did this for quite a while. I had a really good buddy in the lab who let me get away with anything. And then one day we had a breakthrough. I told people later that I used the J. Paul Getty formula of success. Rise early, work hard, strike oil. So in other words, just dumb luck, basically, you know. But then what happened was the pivotal part. You know, I ended up leading a team, multifunctional team, to launch this. And I never had so much fun in all my life as leading that team. And I realized that's what I really love to do. So I spent the rest of my, 29-year career. They kept changing the signs out in the front yard, but it was basically the same company, you know. And then about 15 years ago, in fact, 2005, I started up the AIM Institute. And so now we help, clients, mostly Fortune 500 level, B2B only, because that's all I know. And we help them with product development. Most of it in the early stages, new product blueprinting, but also some product launch. And now we've gotten into like big project de-risking, but it's all about new product development, delivering, helping our clients deliver innovation to their customers. Cool. So that's how we got here.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think that if you asked many of us in the world of B2B marketing, we all came, we had some technical stint, right? I could probably tell also stories about being a chemical engineer and wondering what was I thinking, but it's okay, right? We are all smarter for it.
And did you notice that at some point in time, somebody tapped you on the shoulder? You're a chemist, you're an engineer, and they said, poof, you're a marketing person. You said, really, I am? And that was your marketing, right?
And that was sufficient, right?
Yeah,
then.
right.
Yeah. And we didn't even know what we didn't know, which was scary. Yeah. So we'll be helping each other, not be so oblivious to what we might need to know. So I'm curious what you're thinking. I know you have lots of clients that you work with, and we've been living in a very different world. I have a hard time imagining if I was back 30 years and when I was working in the lab, and if I couldn't go into my laboratory, how the heck would I be doing my job right now? That my technicians aren't gathering data. There's no one keeping the liquid nitrogen filled in the tank. So what do you have as advice for those of us that are sitting at home trying to figure out how we keep our product development running?
Yeah, great. Well, here's one thing I noticed while I was in the corporate world. I noticed that every time I would have a performance review, either I was the subject or I had to give one, it just kept coming back to two things. Did I learn and did I contribute during the course of the year? Now, if all I did was contribute and just kept wailing away at the wood pile, never sharpened my axe, that wasn't too good. And if all I did was ivory tower learning, kept sharpening the axe and didn't accomplishing, well, that probably wasn't going to last very long. So there's always a balance of contribute and learn, contribute and learn. And what I noticed was if I was in a staff function, strategy or something like that, I tended to be really heavy on the learning part. And when I was in a line function, I was heavy on the contributing part. And so I think right now we're in a staff function. We should still be contributing. And later in this episode, we'll talk about some very specific ways that we can move the ball forward. But to me, right now, it's a wonderful opportunity to sharpen the axe, to learn new skills, really move things forward as individuals right now.
Yeah, so, we've had this conversation a few times where folks have suggested our folks at home could really spend this time doing things.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have pushed back and said, I don't know why you all think we have extra time.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to get into the detail of why, if you eliminate having to get a shower and get dressed and commute, trade off against making lunch and making sure someone's got their homework done or work from home homework done and dealt with, trying to find a quiet spot. So I think all of that has been really, really challenging, and maybe more than everything, how much to invest in it while we're waiting, right? If someone had told us it was going to be 6 months, we'd invest in something more than if we keep thinking it's 2 weeks and 2 weeks, right? So,
well, I think maybe your word invest is the key word there, because I think this mindset doesn't apply just to when we're at home during this pandemic. It probably applies all the time, but I think some of us at least will have more of an opportunity now. But I think it's a good mindset. And let me just tell you what I'm thinking here. So, we've had a chance to train thousands of client friends. And as you know, companies let people go. So we have this diaspora that goes out and they land at a new company, but in between they're looking for a job. So I get dozens and dozens of emails every year. Hey, Dan, I'm out of job. I'm looking for work, And here's what I noticed over the years. There's two situations. There's one situation where the person, while we were training them, took that opportunity to heart and they really applied it. I'm sure it wasn't easy for them. They had the normal firefighting to put out, but they saw it as an opportunity to really build their skills and get better at something. And when I get those calls, I have this big grin on my face because, man, I can start plugging them into new companies. And I feel like I'm doing a favor for the company I'm plugging in because I know this person can really do it. It's very exciting. And then I get the other emails and I'm thinking, yeah, I remember you showed up and, you were very friendly at the workshop. You were pleasant. You had a very good appetite. You were there, but you didn't do it, And so I think it's a little bit of an attitude. Can we seize the opportunity? And sometimes people do and do not seize it during normal times. And now the question is, what can we do to seize that opportunity to develop some skills we'll have the rest of our careers?
Yeah, I'll echo that just in my personal life that, when there's something that's really a kind of a bummer and I really am not excited by it, it's always thinking about, so what can I get out of this? Which is why I think about this particular time as such a great experiment.
Yeah.
When would we ever have a chance to look at climate data this way, right? So if you're a climate science, this is a wonderful opportunity to look at data you wouldn't have had. And so this is another opportunity to look at your team and how they work in this fashion, or to evaluate other things. If you can put that positive spin on it while dogs are asking to go outside and kids are crying.
Exactly right. Yeah, so it's not easy. Yeah.
So people are working through this, but then there's these organizational units called businesses. So what are you thinking businesses should or shouldn't be doing right about now?
Well, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but do you remember Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Your parents probably told you about this book, right?
Yeah, right. That's exactly how.
Wonderful, wonderful book. And, in the book, he talks about PMPC, production and productive capability. Basically, he's talking about results and capabilities, not unlike what we just got done talking about contributing and learning, right? And so what I find is that most companies focus tremendously on the results every quarter, after quarter, after quarter. And at the end of the year, they hit the reset button and they do it again and they do it again and they do it again. But a lot of times they don't focus enough on capabilities. And if you think about it for just a little bit, could you think of any endeavor where you have a winner, a champion, that they didn't focus on their capabilities? I mean, think about a chess player focusing on capabilities, or a gymnast, or what about a rock climber? What if I show up at the base of El Capitan? I don't have the right climbing equipment. I have absolutely no skills. I got flabby abs, but boy, I want results, right? So we got to build capabilities. And I would say for businesses, this is the time to do that. We understand that things are tough right now, but it doesn't take much money, certainly, to build capabilities. Let's do that now. And you see it over and over again. You saw it at the Great Recession. Some companies hunkered down and wrung their hands. Others said, man, we're gonna come out of this thing going fast, leaving skid marks, you know? And so I would say capabilities is the overriding thing I would recommend for businesses.
Yeah, that does remind me of the Japan Olympics, right? What are the Olympians doing? They're not just going to wait till next year. They're going to keep preparing, right?
They're going to keep preparing, build the capabilities. Yeah.
Have to. Yeah. So, so those of us that are in B2B, right? Because we live in this derived demand world, which is so painful. What do you think we should be doing besides sharpening our axes? I mean, is there anything we can be doing in that supply chain and thinking about how that works with each other?
Yeah, I think so. You know, what I would recommend doing is taking a little bit of time to think about why we're in business. I know this sounds a little bit strange, but I like to kind of really step back. And, you know, when I talk to executives, I ask them, you know, what your goal is. And you've heard this, right? It's maximize shareholder wealth. I wish, you know, if Ralph was on here, we would probably use the rest of the time, you know, lamenting that. But the fact of the matter is that's a great result, but it's a terrible goal, right? You want a goal to be something that engages and excites people and moves them forward, something they can do, you know? And so I believe it's organic growth. This is what really drives those shareholder results. It's growing organically, you know? So let's just take it down from that. You know, the result is shareholder wealth. We want to grow organically in a profitable and sustainable fashion. And how do we do that? The only way of doing that is understanding and meeting customer needs better than others. There's lots of things we can do that will, in the short term, drive growth. But if we want to keep doing it over and over again, it's really understand and meet customer needs. I remember benchmarking 3M 25 years ago when I was inside the company, because I wanted to figure out what are they doing that the rest of us are not doing. And the one thing that stands out, I interviewed several people there. You know what he said? He said, we figure out what kind of pain our customers are having and we figure out how to solve it. Understand and meet customer needs. So I think that is the thing that I would focus on as B2B professionals. And I would even say this, I would say as B2B marketers, I would like us to think more in terms of early stage and late stage marketing. You know, the late stage marketing, as Ralph has said, is blowing up the balloons at the trade show. It's the promotion, right? But the early stage marketing is figuring out what our customers want. And truthfully, I could go over data later if we want to talk about it. B2B companies do a lamentable job of understanding what those needs are. And not only that, but let's imagine you're the executive land of a company. You know, I got to understand and meet customer needs. Which one will you focus on? If you could spend all your time working on the meeting part, what does that mean? Maybe you're hiring a little bit brighter R&D people. You're hiring a few more R&D people. Is that really the thing that's going to separate you? What if everybody else is just doing a miserable job of understanding customer needs? That's where you can make a difference. And I think as B2B marketers, that's where we can really shine. Keep the late stage marketing going, don't abandon that, but let's really show our colors in the early stage marketing.
So historically, if you look back on the last couple of these downturns, it makes me wonder aloud, which is why I'm going to ask you, because I can just say that now. What do you think? Do you think our customers' needs have changed with this virus? Have they changed sufficiently that we really need to rethink our offers?
I think so. Will.
Not just like on-time delivery, but lots of things, right?
I think
it's changed.
Yeah, I think they will, and I don't think I understand it, and maybe we don't understand yet. I expect business models are going to change. You know, we're seeing some dramatic changes during the pandemic, and I think many people believe that we don't know what the new normal is. I mean, normal is a setting on our clothes dryer right now. You know, we don't know what normal looks like, you know? And so I think as B2B marketers, I think our objective, or one objective, is what's the new normal going to be? What is the new business model? It's going to be shifting. And that goes back to understand customer needs. How can we be the first to figure out what those new needs are? You know how this works. If you're in marketing, you are looking for market discontinuities, right? That's your play. You want to get into an unfamiliar market, look for one that's suffering or going through market discontinuities. Talk about market discontinuities. We got them falling off the trees, right?
Right. So now's a great time to go figure out what other people aren't meeting as needs and see if you can meet them, right?
Exactly.
So that's leads me into my next one, which is, okay, so how does product development change? Because, a lot of us are running beautiful stage gate programs with wonderful data, and all of our target dates have now been missed. And
Yeah.
even the question would be, is this a product we need to launch now? So what do we do with all that product development planning that we had, and what do we do about the new products that we now determine we need?
Yeah. If it's nothing else, product development should be about learning. It should be about being nimble. Bob Cooper, father of StageGate, brilliant researcher, he's adopting agile StageGate. And I think it's a recognition we live in a time where we have to be very agile, flexible. And so what I would say is, first of all, if your product is in a StageGate process now, how well did you truly understand those customer needs in the first place? That's, I think, a beginning question. And then the second question would be, how might those customer needs have changed? And my experience is the vast majority of products in the product development cycle were not really well understood. They weren't aimed well, if you will. R&D worked on something that we hoped or thought customers wanted, and the aiming was not nearly as good as it should have been, because we didn't do a great job of early stage marketing. Now I think we maybe even have another level of uncertainty layered on top of that.
Yeah, so maybe a good time, if you're not sure you did the upfront work well, if you can do it now while you aren't spending more money in the development process making, maybe this is a great opportunity, right?
If you think about, if you think about that understand and meet again, think about 3 phases of product development. Think about the front end where we're trying to figure out what customers want. Think about the development stage, which is now we go in the lab and we push back the frontiers of modern science. And then think about the third phase, which is, we launch our product to glory and honor for all involved. I would say this is probably true anytime, but maybe especially now. Take some of your resources in that middle development stage and move them up and out. Take some of the resources that you would have invested in the development stage, move them up to the front end, and spend more time figuring out the understanding what the customers want. I love to take technical people out on interviews and so forth. Okay, and then I think take them out. I say up and out, and instead of just talking to ourselves about what customers want, let's talk more to the customers about. So move. It doesn't mean more resources. It means shifting resources up and out.
Right. So what a great use of time if I can't be in the lab to be able to talk to customers, if I could coordinate that, right? That'd be great.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've got a bunch of clients, and there's probably, the ones that are leading edge. I'm more interested in so what are your top 20% clients doing right now that we could all be doing? Got any secrets?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things. Let me start with telling you what the best are doing all the time, and then let me tell you what the best are doing right now, if I may. If you ask me for one single thing that will ramp up a company's innovation more than anything else, I've had the same answer for many years now. And it's this: don't do any significant product development in that development stage, where your expensive chemists and engineers are working. Don't do anything of significance unless you have unbiased, unfiltered, quantified evidence of what customers do and don't want. It is not nearly as hard as you might think, as most people might think. But I believe firmly at some point in the future, B2B companies will look back and say, wait a minute, are you telling me that B2B companies went into that expensive development stage and they could have had both qualitative and quantitative interviews, and they didn't do the quantitative interviews to know for sure what customers wanted? Are you sure about that, Dan? Well, yeah, I'm afraid that's it. So that is the number one thing. If it's going to take a couple man months or person months in the development stage, that's fine. If it's technology development, which is different than product development, that's fine. I mean, technology development is science facing. It turns money into knowledge. Product development is market facing. It turns knowledge back into money. But if it's product development, let's not do it until we know what the market wants for sure. So that's the overarching thing that the best companies do. Now, during the pandemic, what are they doing? many of them are shifting to this virtual VOC. We just started using ourselves the term VVOC, virtual voice of customer, I think like 3 weeks ago. We wrote a white paper last week or 2 weeks ago. We had been studying this matter of a web conference interviewing since, well, this is no coincidence, 2009. And we all remember what happened there, right? Our clients couldn't go physically out and do any interviews. So we started using WebEx, for what we called remote interviews at the time. And so over the last dozen years, we've been developing and kind of fine tuning as oh, by the way, you can also do this. Well, as you can imagine, the shift has been dramatic. Now we're really studying it hard. We've actually found some extra advantages of virtual VOC, and it's shocking how effective it can be. So that's what some of the best are doing right now.
So good. We just had a note come in from Kelly Lawrence, who was saying, agree that there's a lot of need for upfront work, but how do companies collect this test marketing feedback in this virtual world? I think that leads us straight to this question. Yeah. So why don't we turn to the virtual VOC? So we sent out, and if you didn't get a copy of this by any of our invites, your white paper that you just referenced, yeah. And you'll go through some of that with us. But I think that really is something, if we're going to be sitting at home for yet another couple weeks, we should figure out how to get this to happen, because I figure we're still not going to go on a plane anywhere, right? So let me let you turn to that. I think you had some polls too that you wanted to do. You just call it out when you want to do it.
Yeah, we had a couple polls. I think Lori may remember better what they were asking. Let's see.
All right. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh. So this is a question about how much of it is virtual, right?
So this means how much of your VOC, think about when you're going physically on a plane, and how much of it do you do by web conference, basically.
And then just pick a number and submit it. All right, we'll see what that result is.
I'm quite curious to.
Yeah, I think people are thinking, so Lori's giving them some chances to get back. Or everybody's worried that oh, look, that's a really bifurcated.
Right? Yes, it is. Yeah, half are doing a lot of it, and half are doing not very much.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, interesting. That's very good. Thank you. I think we have one more, don't we?
Yeah, I think there might be two.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Next one, Lori. She's clicking.
Okay. I can practically hear it.
All right. So how likely are you to conduct virtual VOC this year versus last year?
Drum rolls.
Yeah, we'll wait for a second.
Wow.
Okay. All right. We're already motivating people. Whew. 63 think. Okay. All right.
Very nice.
All right. So go tell us a little bit more about this virtual VOC, Dan.
Yeah. So rather than me wave my arms, they've seen enough of my face. Let me share my screen here a little bit and see if I can get this right. There we go. Okay. So this is that white paper, and I'm not going to drag you. I'm not going to read it to you. You guys will be glad to hear that. But I just want to go to, there's one page where we summarize the advantages. And let me just hit this very quickly, because it might lead to some questions that we can cover while everybody's together. So I'll just go over these very quickly. So first of all, the obvious, right? Lower cost. I mean, if you go out and do some qualitative interviews and you take 2 or 3 people, moderator, note taker, observer, and you do, half a dozen qualitative, then you go back and do the quantitative. It's not hard to rack up $50,000 in travel expenses, and it can go up from there. But here's the thing that maybe isn't as apparent. If you add up all these visits, you've easily got 2 to 3 person months of time of your employees you've invested. And probably 80% of that time is sitting in a cramped airline seat or a security line, which is not real productive. So there's an obvious advantage. Now, before I go through the rest of these, let me say something really important. I am not going to try to convince you that virtual VOC is better than in-person VOC. In fact, quite the opposite. The gold standard, in my view, is in-person, sitting across the person, and really understanding them. So you'll never hear me say VVOC is better. But I think there can be a balance. So I think it's obvious to us what the advantages of the in-person are. So that's why I'm going to focus a little more on the advantages of the virtual. Dispersed. If you've got your customers marketing in Chicago and their R&D in Houston, virtual is wonderful because you want to get them there in the same conversation. Now, why is that? Well, if you're doing divergent qualitative interviews, it's like brainstorming. And none of us have been in a brainstorming session by ourselves. One reason is we build off each other's ideas. So that's one reason. In the quantitative preference interviews, you absolutely want to have the main decision makers and influencers. Because if you only get a idiosyncratic view of R&D or sales or marketing or something else, you're not going to get a representation of how that decision making is naturally made. Therefore, you need to get them in the conversation, and using virtual means is a wonderful way of doing it. Now, some of these are small, but they're kind of cool. Viewable probing tips. If I have next to me, if maybe I'm a beginner on interviewing, there's some neat probing tips. We teach the what and why method of probing at our workshop. So if I have those tips right in front of me on a virtual setting, I can come across pretty professional. I can still use them on a conference room table, but it's not quite as smooth. Training for colleagues. You got somebody you want to become a VOC pro in your company. Well, you could have them follow you to 2 or 3 of these, chase you around the country on a plane, and then have to introduce them and all that. Well, bring them to your virtual. They don't have to even be in the same conference room. Introduce them, no eavesdropping, please, but then let them observe, and they will learn so much just by watching. Probing suggestions is number 5. Try to get a conference room with a whiteboard. Once we get back into our offices, and then have your observer, or maybe 2 observers, go up and write some notes, some great probing questions on the whiteboard. Your moderator can take a peek at the whiteboard every now and then. He or she will just come across as a brilliant moderator. They'll sound like an NPR Nina Totenberg or Terry Gross. Just brilliant probing. Then assistance, number 6 for the note taker. So this is kind of weird, but we've noticed in-person interviews, the note taker falls behind. People stop looking at the screen, even though we're projecting the sticky notes or whatever the notes are. Well, all there is to look at in a virtual VOC are the notes being typed. So the customer tends to slow down their pace. They add new things. They make suggestions and so forth. Number 7, rapid debriefing. There's a thing called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve that is a really depressing curve that hour by hour, minute by minute, you start forgetting what you learned in a meeting. And so if I can just kill the Zoom meeting and immediately start debriefing, it's a lot faster than looking for a coffee shop or meeting in the airport lounge. Number 8, easier scheduling. If you've got to find a day or a day and a half for travel for all 3 of you and match that up with the customer, that's a lot tougher than just finding, a 1.5 hour time slot. Everybody's okay. The other aspect is, would you rather have a vacuum salesman come to your front door or call you on the phone? Well, it's not quite the same, but the fact is many clients will give you some web conference time and they might not be as excited about you getting your foot in the door and then having to chase you out the lobby and all that afterwards. Number 9, low impact cancellations. We're going to have some cancellations. On one hand, you got to limp back through the airports, empty handed. On the other one, you just reschedule. The last one's my favorite. So if most companies, I think, are way too lackadaisical on the timing of their projects. If you take a product that's going to eventually have sales of $5 million, average gross margins, what would be the net present value of launching it 1 month earlier? The answer is about $80,000. So now we're looking at 20 work days. So $4,000 per day of net present value for accelerating it. So what can we do to go faster? Well, the fact is you can schedule multiple interviews with VVOC. We've done 2 a day, 4 a day, if it's preference. You can get more scheduled in. You can just go faster with your project. So those, Lynn, would be some of the advantages. Now, I won't go over it now, but in the rest of this white paper at the end, there's actually 8 tips for how to do really, really good virtual VOC. So we talked about capabilities. If somebody's interested, they could actually do this over the next few weeks and months and get pretty darn good at it. So that would be my advice.
So when I listen to this list, I start to really think about, you said to me, in person, still the gold standard, you should do it in person. But I almost feel like sometimes the barrier to getting it done in person, getting the time on the calendar, getting the people free to travel, making sure you can get out there and get back, and then rolling up the data and set, as you say, making sure you can share it and debrief with the teams.
Yep.
All of that makes you do less of them, if any of them, because it just takes so much time.
Well,
and
that's right.
This is like, maybe you should start here and add the personal one-on-one in-person stuff after you've kind of decided the project is worth doing, right?
I think that's right. I think what will happen in the future is people will balance these out. In fact, you raise a really good point. Let me just go down here. One of the first tips we have is called choose wisely, okay? And so here are some things to consider as you're choosing which. And I just love the idea of balance between them. So, as I get a little more comfortable doing this, the virtual VOC gets easier and easier. If I were to have a relationship with the customer, it gets easier and easier. Now, if I need to do a tour, I'd probably better go and do the in-person, unless I can convince my customer to strap on a GoPro camera, It gets much easier with preference. A lot of times our clients do discovery face-to-face and virtual, but they'll do all of the preference, by web conference. Anyway, you're exactly right. It's not an either or. I mean, we have seen some cases where circumstances dictated all the interviews were in person, and we've seen some where all the interviews were virtual. But frankly, for the vast majority of teams, there's probably a balance of the in-person and the virtual that's just right.
Yeah, this is great. Good. So I'm going to take a pause for just a second and remind folks that please, you can feel free to type a question to us. You can also use the little raise hand function if you can find that in your Zoom control panel, and I'll be watching for those. And then I'm going to let you talk to me about anything else that you want to tell me about, because I know you have other things you want to tell me, Dan.
Yeah, you betcha. I'll see if I can think of anything else to say. I'll work at that real hard, Lynn.
I have a question that I can speak to right answer. I answer this one for Leslie Christian. There is a link to the paper that Dan is referencing. So this white paper was in the happenings email that went out last Thursday, and in the marketing in uncertain times email that went out this morning. And it will also be in the link that comes with this video recording when it goes live. So if you signed up for this event, you're going to get a link to it again. Great. You can also find it. Dan, show them your website.
Yes, I shall.
So you can get it also on Dan's website, right?
Yep.
So he's going to navigate there and show you that. And so on the AIM site, find that and maybe some other things.
Well, exactly right. So if you come out to theaiminstitute.com, there's two, let me just explain the menus here. Stay away from services and training because we charge for that stuff. The free stuff are these growth tools. We maybe get a chance to talk about those, and then the insights. And what we're talking about now, there's research, there's ebooks, there's a video series. What we're talking about right now is an ebook. So if you go to Insights and hit that, sorry, hang on a second. I hit the wrong button. Let me try that one more time. White papers, there we go. And when we get to the white papers, the top one is virtual VOC. It's also www.virtualvoc.com. I love to get Van the URL. So virtualvoc.com will get you there, or come out here and it's a free download. Yeah.
And there's a lot of other good things there too, right?
Yeah. One of the things we may end up talking a little bit about, Lynn, is I want to see the marketing function elevated. Maybe we'll say that for if there's a little time at the end. But, one of the things that can elevate the marketing function is if we as marketers can be the ones who really help our company with organic growth. So one of the things I would recommend you at least consider doing is go out to this video series right here, click on this. And what you'll find will be basically 30 videos. And that sounds like, oh no, 30 videos. Well, they're only 2 minutes long.
Binge watching. So. We're going to be binge watching.
Yeah, binge. Right? Exactly right. It's just like Netflix. You're going to love Netflix. Just love it. But at any rate, it's free. You get a new one every week. But there are a lot of messages in here we're trying to get across to your bosses, to executives. And so if there's some things in here we can help with, every one of them elevates the position of marketing. You're central to this. There's also an ebook in here. If you're not into videos, just download this ebook, the ebook for leaders. It's Leader's Guide to B2B Organic Growth. So I would say, the VVOC might be of interest, but I would also recommend folks take a look at the material we have. Well, there's one more research here. We actually have done some research on what does drive B2B organic growth. So, if your executive is thinking about hiring a growth consultant, and they probably aren't right now, but when they say, let's hire a growth consultant to figure out how to grow, you can say, well, wait a minute, there's already a research done, and there's over 10,000 years of B2B professional experience this is based upon. Let's see what the research tells us about B2B organic growth. So those would be some things I would, encourage our viewers to check out on growth.
I think that if I could speak for things that I hear, and we didn't do a poll on this one, but folks can give me feedback afterward, please, is, it's a really challenging time to ask your boss or senior executives for resources, right? Mm-hmm. Like resources come in different kind of categories, resources as in cash, right? Like I'm going to pay for a course or I'm going to pay for something. But resources in terms of people is a different animal, right? Can I rearrange how I use these resources? And I know you had shared with me a few ideas on thinking about that differently. And how one could convince their upline that this would be something they could support.
Well, that's right, Lynn. What happens, this is really true right now, people forget that their employees, well, they're the key to growing, first of all, but they're also a tremendous cost. I'll just give you an example. So I had this really nice guy from a very large multinational company who's based in Shanghai that called yesterday. We had set up an appointment, and we've got a new methodology for de-risking large projects, and we talked about it a little bit. And he was doing a project that I'm sure is burning more than $1 million per year. Okay, but let's just say it was $1 million. It doesn't take a lot. You get 4 or 5 chemists and stuff, and you're burning through $1 million a year easily. And, that means the burn rate is, $1 million a year, that's what, $20,000 a week. It's $3,000 a day you're burning, right? Or $4,000, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And I recommended to him something he could do that would cost about $3,000 actually, and the reaction was, oh, we can't spend $3,000 right now. And he's probably right. They probably are not doing it. And so, but here's the thought I have on this thing. I think we tend to forget that those resources are super valuable. And if we don't do a good job of aiming those resources, now how do you aim them? You aim them by making sure you understand the customer's needs, and you don't guess at it, for sure what the customer needs are. How else do you aim them? Well, you make sure that you're de-risking your project. You're getting all your assumptions out there. You're making sure you don't spend time on the wrong things. You accelerate your project. If there's a landmine that's going to kill your project, you try to see that as soon as possible and get that team off. I just think we tend to be very, very casual with those precious resources, our employees. And frankly, the marketing function is probably the function to do that. I talk to a lot of R&D people, and they say, well, we're working on what we know. Nobody's told us anything else to work on. So I think it can fall to us to do a better job of aiming.
Mm-hmm. And advising. Great. That's great.
Yeah.
So let me turn to the audience here and just give them a second to choose to type to us if they'd like, or raise their hand, because I'd love to hear some voices. We've been trying to engage folks in the town hall and really have it be a conversation. We have yet to go to the version at 4 p.m. with the drink in your hand, but I'm debating that one after the next 2, keep trying the experiment. So, this is your great opportunity for free advice from Dan Adams. So I'm just going to poke at you one more.
Not only that, Lynn, it'll be free advice and worth every penny.
Exactly. Every minute of it. You paid for it. Okay, I'm not seeing it in there, so I'm going to throw some in. Well, okay, thank you, Lori. We told her to cue that up when we have 15 minutes left. So if you think of something that you haven't asked, here's our contact information. So over on the right is everybody from ISBM. That's Rand, I'm sure you know, who's been working on membership. Becky, who manages all of our curriculum. And so many interesting things are coming from that, and myself. And then there's Dan and his website at theaiminstitute.com, where you saw all that information. I'm going to just seg over for a minute and let him keep typing and go to the next slide and just talk about what we've got coming up. Dan, hang with me there, right?
You bet.
Do this. So I just want to let you guys know that we've got a continuous bevy of online things happening. We've moved everything we had all the way through our member meeting that we were scheduling in September, and have decided to make everything available remotely through this medium, right? And that means everything's also recorded. So if you missed it, you get a chance again. So coming up on May 6th is a really special one. Rand is going to be interviewing Robert Fry. If that name sounds familiar, Robert Fry is the person who at DuPont was doing all of their economic forecasting for so long. And now he's retired and doing it for everybody. So you'll want to sign up for that, because if you're a member or you sign up for it, you get the special deal that Robert has given us, which is you can get his monthly forecast that he mails to people now and emails, that normally is $600 or something, and you half price. So for $299, you can get his monthly report of what's happening every month. It's probably going to be valuable for your company. So that's a deal. And then on the 12th, as we continue to look forward and getting out again, we have Bob Thomas and Lars Patterson, who are going to talk about what you need to measure and how those measurements will affect how you decide things, on the 12th. And then we have May 28th, B2B Market Research Best Practices by Richard Tritle. So that's a webinar. So check those out. But if you miss them, feel free to go to the library. Well, you'll still find them. And then B2B Pulse, which is on isbm.org from our partners at Penn State, have refreshed that. And we now have new content weekly coming out in a condensed form. And so if you sign up for Pulse, you'll get that weekly update of the things that are new and latest and most interesting things for us in B2B. So it's curated content, not just everything. Good, I knew while I talked, I would get some questions. So now we do. So we have a question. You mentioned that there might be new business models. Yeah, Lori, you go back, thanks. You mentioned that there might be new business models that might come out of this. So how would you investigate and de-risk something that would be so transformative as a new business model, Dan?
Yeah, so this is the burning question. What will it look like when we get past this? And we could probably imagine some things will stay, they'll return to where they were, but some things could be very, very different. We don't know what's going to be happening with, concerts and large gatherings. We don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know if there's going to be another virus. We don't know if people will be trained to behave differently. We don't know. But I think as marketers, it probably should force us not to feel like we need to have the answers, but to ask two new questions. The first question is, now what are the market segments I want to focus on? Because, there may have been some market segments before that looked fairly attractive. So as we were doing our strategic planning, hopefully we're looking at all our markets, and is it attack, is it maintain, is it withdraw, is it study? We're doing this, right? Well, we ought to revisit that and say, now going forward, what are the attractive markets and what are not? So it should force us to reevaluate which fields of play we're even looking at investing our resources. And one of the things, we did some research on what drives growth, and one of the big differentiators between the winners and losers wasn't market segmentation per se, it was market concentration. And market concentration is market segmentation plus disproportionately focusing on some segments and disproportionately not focusing on others. So I think the first thing is, where are the markets we want to really load up on in the new world we're going into? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing I think we need to be open to is, now within that market segment, what are the outcomes that are now important? Even if we did quantitative analysis and we looked at all the outcomes and we identified certain important unsatisfied ones before, It doesn't mean they're the same ones anymore. There may have been some major changes that have taken place. So for me, when I think about the early stage of marketing, I like to think of it this way. First, you identify the market segment, and then you identify a job to be done. It might be, the motion control on a front end loader. It might be, painting a wall, whatever the job to be done is, right? And then you're looking for areas of imperfection. And those areas may change after the pandemic. My colleague and good friend, Scott Burleson, just wrote a book. It's got 48 rules of jobs to be done, okay? It's kind of scary, isn't it? But he makes this analogy. He says, Michelangelo was asked, how did you create the statue of David? In fact, his book is called Statue in the Stone, okay? And he was asked by the Pope, how did you create the statue of David? And he goes, well, all I did was took away everything that didn't belong, And so our customers have a job to be done, and there are things that are preventing, or there's things that are causing imperfection. So we need to reevaluate what those things are, and our job as marketers then is to chip away at the stuff that doesn't belong and help our customers do that job as perfectly as we can. So I don't know what the answers are. I can't really tell you, but I know where we should be looking. Markets, and then the outcomes within those markets.
Oh, that's great. I love the envision of taking things away that don't belong and what's left is there. It's such an anti-intuitive way of even figuring out what your best markets are, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us get stuck in the definition of our business is to serve this market.
Right.
Which, at some point it could be because you've got so much invested in, people in Detroit or whatever that is in that particular market. You've got so much that you have to protect that it's really hard to react to this big change and say, so if we could do it all over again, would we put all of our resources there? And what does it mean to move them? Because it is a huge transformation to be able to say, I'm going to go taking myself out of this market and move to another one. And, it's probably why we don't see large companies make huge transformations, right?
Well, they don't. They end up being dinosaurs standing next to a tar pit because, this is what they know, But in fact, that's what we need to do. We need to look at these and say, what we've learned, Lynn, we've done some research on this. We find that 95 to 96% of markets are underserved at some level. There's something we could do for them. Only about 4 or 5% are overserved. But we find that about 50% of them are dramatically underserved and have some screaming needs. So it should be a combination of how attractive is this market in terms of growth, size, and the other dynamics, competitive landscape, and how underserved is it, and what's the fit with our ability to serve it. Those are the things that we really shouldn't leave to chance. We should think about very seriously and get a little bit quantitative while we're doing it.
Yeah, you should never waste a good crisis, right? For
exactly
all those reasons. So we have a question from Leslie that says, so Dan, are you suggesting that we reevaluate our strategy or reevaluate our tactics?
Yes and yes. I think we should reevaluate our strategy every year. I think we should step back every year and say, now, what are those market segments we're focusing on? And let's go back to the 4 choices you have, maintain, withdraw, attack, or study. So typically what you do is you take picture a portfolio, bubble chart. It's called the GE McKinsey graph, right? More attractive is up on the chart, and then our competitive capabilities, is on the horizontal. And so you're generally looking for bubbles, market segments are up high, they're attractive, that you want to move to the right. You want to improve your competitive capability. That's the essence of strategy. And if you put attack on all those bubbles, there's something wrong, right? The great lesson of warfare is concentration of force against weakness. So what I recommend is the ones that you want to pursue, you call it an attack or a study strategy. Then you go out and you do lots of front-end innovation. You do a lot of early stage marketing. We call it new product blueprinting. You figure out what those customers want. Now, when you come back again next year, that should inform any revisions to your strategy. It won't be dramatic, but you will have learned something. Something wasn't as attractive as you thought. Maybe it's an attractive market, but it's pretty much overserved already, or what they want isn't what you can deliver. So you modify that. You could probably get by without that exercise when everything is stable over time. It's a very dangerous strategy to not do this type of strategy where when you've got big market discontinuities.
You know, we sit inside these big value chains, right? Where many of us are in the middle. Some of us are at the very, very front end of materials. But where none of us are at the very end, you know, where the consumer buys it for the most part.
Right.
And so we're pulled in two directions as how our supply chain giving things to us as we need them immediately upon the improvement, or being required to deliver them immediately upon the improvement, and nobody having enough warning. Is there some way that we can improve that reaction time? Because that feels to me like one of the biggest challenges to being able to come out of this fast is being able to react quickly.
Yeah, you know, one of the things we strongly recommend is interviewing your customers' customers and going down the value chain to the last business in the value chain. Now, there's only two things we can do as a B2B supplier. We can impact our customers' products and we can impact our customers' processes. Now, if you're making equipment, you might only impact your customer's process. So nothing past your customer will change, in which case you don't go down the value chain. But if you make materials or components, your product's going into your customer's product, ergo, the value chain impact goes all the way down to the last business. So if for our listeners and viewers, if you're in the materials or components business, it's probably very likely you need to go down that value chain. When you do that, what you'll learn in some cases is your direct customers didn't know what their customers really wanted. Now, this won't be apparent to you until you do quantitative preference interviews, because, you know, it's arm waving. We've had some clients do this, and they've gone to their customers, figured out what their customers, came back to their direct customers, taught their direct customers what their customers really wanted. They knew better than their own customers did. Now, talk about a valued supplier who's coming in, not just selling you what they have, but telling you what your customers want. And so this is the kind of thing we can do in B2B. It's very, very powerful. And it avoids these big surprises because we have our high beams on, not our low beams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great opportunity for that.
Yeah.
So we're at the bottom of the half an hour, and so we've been talking for a bit. I'm going to wrap this up unless there's any more questions that I see come in, and I'm just double checking that I don't see any hands up. So I'll remind you, based on this slide, that you can reach out to Dan directly if you've got another thought, and you can always reach out to Rand or Becky or I if you have any questions or anything that we can do to help you get through this uncertain time with any more certainty than we might be able to bring you. And this recording will be available. You'll get an email when it's available and posted, and then you can share it with your friends. Thanks so much, Dan. You know, I could talk to you for hours, and we probably will just continue on after we pull the plug on this one. But thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lynn, and thank you to all the folks who took some time out for this. Enjoyed this.
Great. All right. Thank you, Lori. We'll turn it off now. Thanks all, everyone. Stay healthy.